So we've got the duck animated. I've moved it off to the right hand side of the screen because I want to examine how to make this thing move in this session. Okay, so I've just moved it from the center to the right of the screen. Okay, let's get back to it. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is add a few more components to this duck. Right, things I'm going to do is tag it. Tag. And we haven't got a list sec, so I'm going to just add a new tag. And this is going to be duck. I tend to have tags all lowercase. And then I'm going to tag it as a duck. We'll see what we're going to do with that much later on. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is add some physics 2D components to it. So I'm going to click components, add components, physics 2D. And I'm going to add a rigid body 2D. There we go. Now, remember we added a rigid body 2D with the previous game with the apple catch. And one of the main things about the rigid body 2D is that it adds gravity. So it made the apples fall. Perhaps it'll have the same effect here. Let's have a look. Oh, yes. Okay. So now the duck falls because it's affected by gravity. We don't really want this to happen until the duck is dead. So we've got an option here with the body type. By default, it says it's dynamic, affected by gravity. But I can change that by clicking on the drop down and turn it into kinematic. Now, kinematic means that we can move it. And this kinematic property is something we can turn on and turn off. If it's kinematic, it's not affected by gravity, and gravity disappears. So there it is, as we were before. Right, so we'll use that later on. I'm going to just minimize that. Now, the next thing I'm going to add is a collider. So again, in physics 2D, I'm going to add a box collider. Open that up, and I'm just going to zoom in a bit and edit that collider. Right, so this is going to be the area that's going to be a target on the duck. I don't want it to be too easy, so I'm going to restrict the size of the hit area. Oops. It'd be helpful if I just turned off the sky. So I'm just selecting the sky, and this little tick here turns it off back to the duck. And edit the collider. And it's much easier without a background. So that's going to be the hit area. So you're not going to get a score by hitting the duck's tail or the beak. Right, let's turn the sky back on. Right, so you can see the box collider there. Now, remember that colliders have two purposes. One is if you bump into something, then it doesn't go through it. The other thing is to make it a trigger so that if something happens, like we shoot it, then it can react to it. So I'm going to turn this into a trigger. Okay. The next thing to do is now to animate the duck, move it. So I'm going to do this with a script. So I've got the scripts folder here. I'm going to add a new script. And I'm going to call this move duck, because that's what it's going to do. Right, so there's the skeleton script. Let's go into it. Before we get into scripting the movement of the duck, I just want to examine how we're going to make it move in 2 dimensions. Now, I want you to imagine this sort of grid with 0, 0 in the middle. We've got the x's on the horizontal, y's on the vertical. Let's superimpose our duck. Now, I always want the duck to move from right to left. So we'll put in an arrow to indicate the direction it's going to travel. Now, this means that we've got quite a long arrow, so that's the fastest speed. As it goes negative, it's minus 12. But I want the ducks to travel at different speeds. So let's say it's between minus 12 and minus 8 per frame. The other thing is I don't want the ducks to move in a horizontal line. So I want some ducks to move up and other ducks to move down. Right, so that looks between, say, minus 2 and plus 2. So let's put those in. Right, so what I need to do is to create a vector3 variable which will enable us to choose something between minus 12 and minus 8 and minus 2 and plus 2 on the y-axis. So here I am in Visual Studio. I'm going to create this vector 3D now. I'm putting it here at the top because it's a global variable, so that start and update and any other function I make will be able to use it. And so it's going to be a vector 3, and I'm going to call it movement. The other global variable I'm going to make is a private. I'll just make this private. You don't actually need the private keyword in here because if it's not public, then it's private by default. However, it's neat, so I'm going to put another one in. And this is when the duck is dead. Right. So in start, I'm going to initialize those variables. I'm not doing it at the top here because, well, this is going to be a prefab and it's best to do everything in the start option for a prefab. Okay, so dead. So when the duck is created, dead is obviously going to be false. And I'm going to set up the movement, and this is going to be a new vector 3, and I'm going to define that. As we said, we're going to have random numbers. So this is the x value. So we've got random range, and we decided we're going to be between minus 12, which is the lowest figure, of course, or the lower figure, and minus 8. Okay, so that's the x value. And the y value, we decided was going to be random range. Lower value is minus 2. The upper value is 2. And because it's a vector 3, we also have a z. Of course, it's not going to move in or out of the screen because it's only 2D. So I'm going to put that as 0. Okay. Right. Let's have a look at the update function. So what we have to do is now add that movement with every frame, but remember to scale it, of course. So I'm going to create I'm going to call this dpos duck position. Okay, it's nice and short. The shorter your variables are, the less chance you have of making a mistake. So I'm going to put the transform dot position into this variable I've created. Oops, spelling. Notice it changed color when I corrected it then. It's always a good idea to watch out for these color changes because it indicates that it recognizes it. So this copies the position of the transform into this variable called dpos. Now I'm just going to add the movement dpos. So dpos plus equals movement. And remember, we've got to scale this, otherwise it'll move so fast you won't be able to see it. So that's time dot, which is the time between frames, so there's a small amount of time. Right, and finally I'm going to put that back into the position of the transform. So okay, let's check that. Just click to attach to Unity. No issues found, which is a great relief. So let's go back. So we've got our new script there. I need to attach that to the duck. And just check that it works. Right. So the duck went flying across there. I might think that's a bit too fast. So I'm going to perhaps change this to -10, and perhaps the slower one would be -5. Let's check that. I'm just going to save that. The shortcut is Control and S. Right, so that's saved. The star has gone on there. Let's check it again. Yeah, that's more manageable. I think I'll stick with those numbers. So now we've got the duck flying across the sky. We need to be able to shoot it to make the game fun. Right, so we've got the duck, and this is where this box collider comes into it. But before we go into that, just look back at the animator, remind ourselves here. So I'm just going to open the animator for the duck, and you remember we put in this transition between flying and falling, and the thing that governed that is that we had this parameter called dead. Yours might have a capital D, and then if it's true, then we do this transition from flying to dead. So what we need to do is to set this transition to true. Okay, let's go back here. Now remember, we've got a component of the duck called the animator, and we need to make reference to this animator here. So let's go back to the script now, and I'm going to add in another class variable. So again, this is going to be private, and it's an animator rather. It's an animator, and I'm going to call it anim. Right, so we've got private animator called anim. Now in the start, I'm going to add this in. So anim equals. Now remember that the animator is a component of the duck, so I can get that component. So we've got get component, and I'm going to put it in angle brackets, and the type of component I'm getting is an animator. Okay, that is a function, so it needs brackets. Right, so that'll get a reference to the animator and call it anim. Okay, on we go. Now I'm going to make another function, which is returns nothing, so it's void, and it's on mouse down. Okay, there we go. So whenever you've got a trigger, it reacts to this on mouse down, so when you click on the trigger. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, check if it's dead already, because if the duck is dead, you can't kill it again. So if dead, return. Now, if we get to this line, 31, then it's obviously is not dead, so I'm going to kill it. Right, so that sets it as dead. Now we need to do that transition from the flapping to the falling state, and we do that by setting the dead parameter of the animator to true. Okay, so I've got a reference to the animator, and we've got, remember that the transitions can be covered by booleans, triggers, integers, or floats, and we decided to use a boolean here. I've got set bool, and the boolean is dead with a capital letter if you've got a capital letter, and we're going to set that to true. Now that should change the transition from flapping to falling. The next thing we've got to do is to take off the kinematic for the rigid body. So I'm going to make another reference up here. So in the class, so this is a rigid body 2D, and I'm going to call this RB2D. And again, I'm going to assign a reference to RB2D in exactly the same way. Component over brackets, rigid body 2D, and the brackets. Right. So going back to my on mouse down now. Right, and we've got this function is kinematic equals false, which changes it from the kinematic type of rigid body to its default value, which is dynamic, and the duck should fall. That looks like I'm already attaching to Unity again. Okay, it's just a warning that I haven't actually used it, but I will. Okay. Now it depends on my skill really if I can actually hit this duck. Let's try and make save that. So I'll see if I can hit it. Missed it. Yes. There's one more thing I want to do, is that if the duck is dead, I don't want it to move across the sky anymore. So I'm going to put in another little warning at the top here. And if, oops. So that'll stop it moving forward. Right, let's just save that with Control S. Stop it. Let's see if I can hit the thing. Missed. Yes. Okay. Not terribly exciting, is it really? Let's make it quack as it hits the ground. So I'm going to add a sound source to the duck. So let's look. Add a component, audio, and I'm going to put in an audio source. Open that. I can close up that. The audio source. Right, I have actually put in a quack here, so I'm going to put that into the audio clip. Now, I don't want this to play as soon as it's awake. I'm going to take that off. Now, yes, that's fine. Let's take the volume down a bit. Don't want to be deafened. So I only want it to quack when it's been hit. So this is another component to the duck, so I can make a reference to that as well. Let's go back here. So I've got another private variable. I'm calling this quack because that's what it sounds like. Okay, and again we need to set up the reference. So I've got a reference to the audio source now, and what I can do is just add it here. And we've got an option to play. Right, so that means it should. Oh, I've got the brackets. Let's try again. Okay, no errors, still that message. Not to worry. Let's stop debugging. Let's see if I can hit it again. Missed. There we go. It's very difficult to hit it when there's only one duck, so next time we'll start spawning them and making it into a proper game.